I'm Alice Hart, 65 years old, and when I rode up to my son Benjamin's Colorado ranch, I found strangers living in my dead mother's house. His mother-in-law Elena sat in that old rocking chair, smoking like she owned the place. "This ranch belongs to my daughter now," she said coldly. My son was sleeping in the bunkhouse, too ashamed to tell me they'd taken everything, even his pride. 3 weeks earlier, he'd let his wife's family stay 2 weeks. Now they'd spent his cattle money and threatened him if he spoke. But Elena didn't know the truth. I'd bought that ranch in Benjamin's name before he ever married. 1 letter, 1 deed, 1 sheriff, and her empire collapsed overnight. When does shame keep someone you love from asking for help, even when they're drowning? Subscribe to see how I broke through my son's silence and destroyed the family that nearly killed him. Comment: have you ever been too ashamed to ask for help? Let me tell you about the morning Benjamin made his biggest mistake. When my son Benjamin finally told me how it all started, I wanted to ride back in time and shake some sense into him. But mothers can't protect their children from every mistake. We can only help them survive the consequences. And by the time I discovered what was happening on his Colorado ranch that autumn of 1887, the trap had already closed around him. It began on a September morning, he said, 3 months before I found him crying in that barn. He'd been standing at his kitchen window with a tin cup of coffee warming his scarred hands, watching his cattle, about 200 head, move slowly toward the creek in the dawn light. The cottonwoods were turning gold, and for the first time in his 34 years of lonely cowboy life, my son felt something he'd never known. Peace. He told me about Charlotte that morning, how she'd made breakfast before dawn, how her dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid, how she'd called him mi amor in that soft voice that made him forget he'd spent 16 years sleeping in other men's bunkhouses, eating beans from tin plates, watching other cowboys go home to families while he rode alone. When I'd bought him that ranch 2 years ago with my life savings from 30 years as an accountant in Denver, I'd imagined him finding this kind of contentment. I just never imagined it would be built on lies. Charlotte wanted to talk, he told me, his voice still carrying the shame of having been so blind. She'd served him breakfast, fried eggs, salt pork, biscuits, and then she'd asked the question that would destroy everything. Her family needed a place to stay, just temporarily, just while her mother's house in Leadville was being renovated, just 2 weeks, maybe 3 at most. Benjamin said his gut had twisted the moment she asked. He'd thought about his winter supplies, the smoked beef and flour and cornmeal he'd put up, the hay for the horses and cattle. He'd thought about the quiet evenings they spent by the fire, just the 2 of them. He'd thought about my words when I gave him the deed. "This is yours, Benjamin, your sanctuary. Don't let anyone take it from you." But then, Charlotte had used the weapon she'd been given by her mother, guilt wrapped in culture and family duty. "Family is sacred, Benjamin," she'd said. "In my culture, we take care of each other. We don't turn our backs when someone needs help. You grew up with just your mother. You don't understand what it means to have a big family always around." When he told me that part, I felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached. She'd used his motherless childhood, used the fact that his father died when he was 4, that I'd raised him alone, as a weapon against him. She'd made him feel like his hesitation was a character flaw, like wanting to protect his home made him selfish and small. So he'd said yes. 2 weeks maximum, he'd told her, the words tasting wrong even as he spoke them. And Charlotte had smiled. He remembered that smile, how it hadn't quite reached her eyes, and kissed the top of his head and told him he was a good man. That's why she'd married him, she'd said. Through the window that morning, Benjamin had seen storm clouds building over the mountains to the east, dark and heavy, moving fast. He should have trusted that warning, should have understood that some storms don't pass. They destroy everything in their path. But he didn't, and 2 weeks became 3 weeks became a nightmare that nearly broke him. I should have visited sooner, should have checked on him after the wedding, should have trusted my instincts when Charlotte rushed him to the altar after only 4 months of courtship. But I'd wanted so badly for my son to be happy, to escape the loneliness that had haunted him since boyhood, that I'd ignored every red flag. That was my mistake, and it nearly cost Benjamin everything. Looking back, the signs were all there. The rushed wedding, the guilt tactics, the way she used his loneliness against him. But when you're desperate to believe someone loves you, you ignore what your gut is screaming. Have you ever missed the warning signs because you wanted so badly for something to be true? Subscribe to see how one agreement destroyed my son's life and comment, what red flags have you ignored? Now let me tell you what happened when that family arrived. 3 days after that agreement, Benjamin was mending fence near the road when he heard the wagons coming. When he told me this part of the story, his voice went flat, like he was describing something that had happened to someone else. That's what trauma does. It makes you a stranger to your own life. He said he knew something was wrong before he even saw what they carried. 2 wagons, heavy and slow, raising dust clouds that hung in the September air. His gut twisted. That same warning he'd ignored when Charlotte first asked. But by then, it was too late to listen. When those wagons rolled into his yard, Benjamin understood why Charlotte had smiled that cold smile 3 days earlier. These weren't the wagons of people planning a 2-week visit. They were loaded like freight trains heading west for good, trunks stacked 6 high, furniture tied down with rope, crates of supplies, even a rocking chair lashed to the side. The horses pulling them looked half dead, their heads hanging low from the weight. Elena Valdez emerged from the first wagon like a conquering general, he said. She was tall, maybe 58, dressed in black silk that had no business on a cattle ranch. Her eyes swept over his property, his land, his house, his life, with the look of someone taking inventory of what they already owned. Not what they were visiting, what they owned. Benjamin, she'd said, not a greeting, just his name. Stated like a fact she was confirming. Help my sons unload. We've had a long journey from Leadville. No, thank you for having us. No, we appreciate your hospitality. Just commands. From the first moment, as if my son were hired help on his own land. Behind Elena came the rest of what Benjamin would later call the occupation. Don Carlos, already reeking of whiskey, though it wasn't yet 4 o'clock. Miguel, built like a bull, moving through the yard like he was marking territory. Isabella, pretty and spoiled, wrinkling her nose at the dust. Raphael and Sophia with their 3 children, who immediately started chasing Benjamin's chickens and screaming like wild animals. Charlotte said 2 weeks, Benjamin had managed to say, watching Miguel and Raphael haul trunks toward his house without asking where to put them. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, what's the difference? Elena had waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. Family doesn't count days, Benjamin. Surely your mother taught you that. Then she'd delivered the blow that made my blood boil when he repeated it to me. Oh, but you had no siblings, did you? No family to teach you proper hospitality? She'd used his motherless childhood as a weapon within 5 minutes of arriving. If I'd been there, I would have put that woman back in her wagon before she unpacked a single trunk. But I wasn't there. And Benjamin, raised to be respectful, to honor his elders, to treat guests with frontier hospitality, didn't know how to fight someone who weaponized courtesy itself. By sunset, they'd taken over everything. Elena had claimed the master bedroom, the one with the bed I'd bought Benjamin and Charlotte as a wedding gift. My back requires a firm mattress, she'd announced. Not asked, announced. And when Benjamin opened his mouth to protest, Charlotte had cut him off with words that still make me furious. Benjamin can sleep in the bunkhouse. It's only temporary. The bunkhouse. That freezing, mouse-infested shack where ranch hands slept during roundup season. My son, in his own home, displaced to servant quarters while strangers occupied his marriage bed. Miguel put his manure-caked boots on Benjamin's dining table. Isabella ordered him to saddle her horse like he was a stable boy. The children broke his father's hand-carved chair, the only thing Benjamin had left of the man who died when he was 4, and no one even apologized. They just laughed and kept playing. That first night, Benjamin lay on a thin mattress in the bunkhouse, shivering as the temperature dropped toward frost. Through the window, he could see lights blazing in his house and hear laughter carrying across the yard. Loud, careless laughter, the laughter of people who knew they'd won something. 2 weeks. He'd told himself in the dark. I can survive anything for 2 weeks. He had no idea those 2 weeks would stretch into 3, then longer. Had no idea that by the time I'd discovered what was happening, he'd be broken, ashamed, and too scared to ask for help. That was the night my son lost his home. And I wasn't there to stop it. When does a guest become an invader? When temporary becomes permanent and you realize you've lost control of your own space. Benjamin saw it in those overloaded wagons, but convinced himself he was wrong. Have you ever let someone into your life who refused to leave, who took and took until there was nothing left? Subscribe to see how 3 weeks of silence nearly destroyed my son, and comment, when did you realize you'd been invaded? Now let me tell you what those 3 weeks did to him. Benjamin didn't tell me about those 3 weeks until he was safe and the Valdez family was gone. Even then, the words came slowly, painfully, like pulling arrows from a wound. But I needed to hear it. I needed to understand how far they'd pushed my son before I arrived. The first week he'd told himself it would get better. The second week he stopped believing his own lies. By the third week he'd forgotten what it felt like to be a man instead of a mule. 4 a.m. every morning. Light the stove, haul water from the well, cook breakfast for 10 people, eggs for Miguel, runny, eggs for Isabella, hard, fresh cream for Elena's coffee, which meant milking the cow before dawn. The children wanted whatever they didn't have, and they wanted it now, and they screamed until they got it. After breakfast came dishes, then firewood. They burned through a month's worth in a week. Then 15 horses to tend, because they'd brought their own and expected him to feed and shoe them all. Then cattle, barely. Then lunch. Then more dishes. Then whatever Elena decided needed doing. Charlotte stopped speaking to him unless she needed something. At night he'd see lamplight in their bedroom window and hear her laughing with her mother. $500 in 3 weeks. His entire cattle sale money, winter feed, repairs, survival, gone on food for people who never said thank you. When he mentioned it to Charlotte, she'd said he was selfish. Family takes care of family, Benjamin, or is that concept foreign to you? His hands bled. He lost 15 pounds. He stopped going to town because he couldn't stand anyone seeing him like this. A man who'd lost his own house. The shame was worse than the exhaustion. That's what he told me. The shame of being too weak to protect what was his. I smelled the wrongness before I saw it. I'd ridden out from Denver at first light that morning, making the journey I made every few months to check on my son. The September air was cold, autumn giving way to early winter, my breath fogging as my horse picked her way up the road. But something was off. The fence line was broken in 3 places. 2 horses in the near pasture looked half-starved, ribs showing. As I rode into the yard, I saw trash scattered everywhere. Broken crates, empty bottles, chicken feathers like something had massacred the flock. This wasn't the ranch I'd left 3 months ago. That ranch had been neat, cared for, proud. This looked abandoned, destroyed. "Benjamin?" I called, dismounting near the barn. No answer. But I heard something. Metal on wood, mucking stalls. I pushed open the barn door. Dawn light slanted through the cracks, illuminating dust and hay. At the far end, a figure bent over a pitchfork, working mechanically. My son, but not the son I'd left. This man was gaunt, shirt hanging loose on a frame that had lost too much weight. His hands were wrapped in bloody rags. His shoulders shook with each breath. "Benjamin!" He flinched, turned. His face, hollow-cheeked, dark circles like bruises, tears streaming through days of beard stubble. "Mom?" His voice broke. "What are you doing here?" I crossed that barn in 4 strides and pulled my son into my arms as he collapsed, sobbing like the child he'd once been. And I knew, whatever had happened here, it ended today. Benjamin suffered for 3 weeks in silence because he was ashamed to admit he needed help, ashamed that he couldn't protect his own home. How many people are drowning right now because pride won't let them ask for a lifeline? Subscribe to see how I broke through my son's shame, and comment, have you ever been too proud to ask for help until it was almost too late? Now let me tell you what he finally confessed in that barn. For a long moment my son couldn't speak. He just shook in my arms, his whole body racked with sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. I held him the way I had when he was 5 years old and his father died, when the world had been too big and cruel for a little boy to understand. But he wasn't a little boy anymore. He was a 34-year-old man who'd been brought to his knees in his own home. "It's all right," I murmured, though nothing about this was all right. "I'm here now. Tell me everything." It took 3 tries before he could form words. When they finally came, they tumbled out like water breaking through a dam. "I haven't slept in my bed for 3 weeks, Mom." His voice was raw, broken. "Elena took it." Said her back needed a firm mattress. Charlotte agreed without even asking me. I'm in the bunkhouse. It's freezing. The stove doesn't work right and there's mice, and I can hear them laughing in my house every night while I'm out there in the dark. I felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached, but I didn't interrupt. He needed to say this. I've spent $500, my whole cattle sale money, everything I saved for winter feed and repairs, gone on food for them, for people who never say thank you, who waste half what they take and demand more. When I told Charlotte we couldn't afford it, she said I was being selfish. That family takes care of family, or is that concept foreign to me because I had no siblings? The words were Charlotte's, but they hit like physical blows, using my son's motherless childhood as a weapon against him. They've destroyed everything, Mom. The children broke Dad's chair, the one he carved, and no one even apologized. Miguel goes through my things like he owns them. Isabella orders me around like I'm hired help. Raphael eats my winter stores and complains they're not good enough. And Charlotte, his voice cracked. Charlotte looks at me like I'm nothing, like I'm in the way in my own house. What else? I asked quietly, because I could feel there was more. Something worse. Benjamin pulled back, wiped his face with his torn sleeve. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. Miguel threatened me yesterday. The words came out barely above a whisper. I asked him to stop smoking my tobacco without asking. He got in my face and said accidents happen to gringos who disrespect Mexican families. He had his knife out, Mom, just cleaning his nails with it, but the message was clear. Ice flooded my veins, not just exploitation, violence, threats. I'm scared, Benjamin admitted, and the shame in his voice nearly broke my heart. But more than scared, I'm ashamed. I'm a man. I should be able to control my own household. I should be able to protect what's mine, but I can't. Charlotte won't help me. She says I'm being dramatic, that her family is just trying to help, that I'm the problem for not understanding their ways. And maybe she's right. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I'm just... Stop. I took his face in both my hands, forcing him to look at me. Listen to me, Benjamin Hart. You are not weak. You are not a failure. You are not the problem. But I let them. You didn't let them do anything. They lied to you. They manipulated you. They used your kindness and your loneliness against you. That's not weakness on your part. That's cruelty on theirs. I should have been stronger. Should have said no from the start. You were under siege, son. You've been fighting a battle alone for 3 weeks against 10 people who don't play fair. That's not a failure of strength. That's impossible odds. I gripped his shoulders, made sure he heard every word. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here now, and I promise you, this ends today. No one treats my son this way. No one. What are you going to do? Fear flickered in his eyes. I'm going to remind those people whose house this is. I stood brushing hay from my riding skirt. My hands were steady, but inside I was pure fury, cold, calculated, and ready. Stay here. I'm going to see exactly what's happening in that house. Benjamin grabbed my arm. Mom, be careful. Miguel, I said quietly, should be careful. I crossed the yard with deliberate steps, frost crunching under my boots. Through the kitchen window, I saw bodies lounging, voices raised in laughter. My son's house occupied by strangers. I didn't knock. It was Benjamin's door, not theirs. The scene inside stopped me cold. Elena Valdez sat in my mother's rocking chair, the one I'd given Benjamin, the one my own mother had rocked me in. She wore black silk like a queen, one hand raised imperiously. Charlotte, this coffee is cold. Bring me fresh. Charlotte moved like a ghost, eyes down, pouring coffee without a word. Never once did she glance toward the barn where her husband suffered. Miguel sprawled at the dining table, boots caked with manure propped on the wood. He was smoking, flicking ash directly onto the surface, a knife beside his plate catching lamplight. Isabella examined herself in Benjamin's dead mother's hand mirror. Where is that vaquero? I want to ride. He should have my horse ready. In the corner, 3 children tore pages from a book. Benjamin's father's Bible, the only thing he had left of the man who died when he was 4. They were folding pages into paper birds. No one had noticed me. Too comfortable. Too certain of their conquest. I slipped into Benjamin's office and closed the door softly. The desk was chaos. Papers scattered, drawers rifled through. But I knew what I needed. The deed was in the top drawer. I unfolded it. Benjamin Hart, sole owner, no mention of Charlotte, no community property. This ranch was his alone, purchased before marriage with my money. She had no legal claim. The marriage certificate confirmed it. Standard territorial form. Nothing giving her rights to premarital property. The financial ledger made my stomach turn. $537 in 3 weeks. His entire cattle sale money plus some. The winter fund, gone. Then I saw it. A letter, folded small, shoved behind the ledger. Fine paper, expensive. Elegant handwriting, Spanish mixed with English. Dated March 1887, 2 months before Benjamin and Charlotte married. Mi hija querida, you have found the perfect target. A lonely gringo cowboy with land and no family to protect him. Secure the ranch, Charlotte. Our family deserves that land. It borders the grazing territory the Anglos stole from your grandfather in 1875. Make him fall in love. Marriage is the key. Once you are his wife, the property becomes ours. Bring the family to stay. We will not leave. Do not fail me. Tu madre, Elena. My hands didn't shake as I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. They should have. Any normal person's hands would shake discovering their child had been hunted like prey, that a marriage had been nothing but a calculated trap. But I wasn't shaking. I was ice. Benjamin's loneliness had been weaponized. His kindness used as a weapon against him. Charlotte had never loved him. From the first smile, the first dance in Grand Junction, it had all been performance. A con, a land grab wrapped in wedding vows. Elena's letter referenced real injustice. Her father had lost grazing rights in 1875 when Anglos took Mexican land. But this ranch had never been theirs. I'd bought it from the Johnson family who'd homesteaded it legally in 1880. Elena was twisting history to justify theft, using her family's legitimate grievance as an excuse for personal greed. I had the proof now. Legal ownership, financial exploitation, written confession of the scheme. I turned toward the door. Elena stood in the doorway, her dark eyes fixed on me, a cold smile on her lips. Looking for something, Senora Hart? Have you ever discovered a betrayal so calculated it made you question everything? When you realize someone's love was always a lie, a performance designed to trap? I held that letter and knew my son had been hunted, his loneliness weaponized, his kindness used against him. How do you forgive someone who planned your destruction from the very first smile? Looking for something, Senora Hart. Elena's voice was silk over steel. I met her eyes without flinching. I found what I needed. Her smile didn't waver, but something flickered behind it. Calculation. She knew I'd been through the desk, but she didn't know what I'd found. Not yet. My son's office, I said quietly. His property, his papers. I don't need permission to look at what belongs to him. Your son is my daughter's husband now. What's his is hers. Not according to Colorado law, not according to the deed in that drawer. I moved past her, close enough to smell her expensive perfume, foreign and out of place in this frontier house. We'll talk soon, Doña Elena. Very soon. I walked out before she could respond, crossed the yard to the barn where Benjamin waited. He looked up when I entered, hope and fear warring on his face. I found something, I said, pulling the letter from my pocket. You need to see this. His hands shook as he unfolded it. I watched his face as he read, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his eyes go wide, watched something break behind them that I wasn't sure could ever be fully repaired. She never loved me. His voice was barely a whisper. It was always about the ranch. I was just an easy target. A lonely cowboy with land and no family to protect him. He looked up at me, and the devastation in his eyes nearly brought me to my knees. I thought I'd finally escaped the loneliness, Mom. Thought I'd found family, but I was just a mark, a con, from the very first dance. I took the letter from his trembling hands and pulled him close. Listen to me, son. Their betrayal doesn't define you. Your capacity to love, even when it wasn't returned. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's humanity. Don't let their cruelty make you cruel. How do I come back from this? He asked into my shoulder. How do I trust anyone again? One day at a time, but first, we deal with them. We deal with And for that, I need help. I rode hard for the reservation border, 20 miles through country that was just starting to show its autumn colors. The cottonwoods along the creek were turning gold, and the air smelled of coming winter. Nashota's camp was where it always was, a small clearing near the water, barely visible from the trail. He was old enough to remember when this land had been Ute territory, before the government forced his people onto reservations in Utah. He came back sometimes, illegally, to visit the homeland that had been stolen from him. The local sheriff looked the other way, and so did most ranchers who remembered trading with the Ute in better times. Benjamin's father had been one of those ranchers. He and Nashota had traded horses, shared meals, treated each other with the respect that transcended the ugly politics of the time. When my husband died, Nashota had brought venison to our door and taught young Benjamin how to track deer. He was family in the ways that mattered. He looked up from the fire as I dismounted, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Alice Hart, it has been many moons. Too many, I agreed, sitting across from him. I need your wisdom, old friend, and your presence. I told him everything. He listened without interruption, his dark eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. In the Ute way, he said finally, land belongs to no one. The earth cannot be owned, only borrowed for the time we walk upon it. But those who work the land, who water it with their sweat and tears, earn the right to stay. Your son's tears have watered that soil. The Valdez family's greed poisons it. I need to restore balance, I said, not with violence, with truth. He looked at me steadily. I will stand with you. My presence will remind them. This land has seen many people claim it. Ute, Mexican, Anglo, but only those who honor it deserve it. When will you confront them? Tomorrow. Dawn. Nashota nodded slowly. I will be there. I will witness justice. Grand Junction Sheriff's Office was a small wooden building on Main Street, smelling of coffee and old leather. Sheriff Tom McKenna looked up from his desk when I walked in, his weathered Irish face breaking into a cautious smile. Mrs. Hart, wasn't expecting you today. I need your help, Tom. I laid the deed on his desk, then the letter, then Benjamin's financial ledger. My son's being robbed in his own home, and threatened. He read through everything carefully, his expression darkening with each page. When he got to Elena's letter, his jaw clenched. That calculating witch. I knew something was off when the Valdez family rolled into town 3 weeks ago, acting like they owned the place. You know them? Know of them? Elena Valdez made her fortune in Leadville silver, thinks it makes her royalty. She's been throwing her weight around town, demanding credit at stores, expecting special treatment. Most folks are too intimidated to say no. He tapped the deed. But this is clear as day. Benjamin's sole property, purchased before marriage. Charlotte has no legal claim. Miguel threatened Benjamin yesterday, said, accidents happen to gringos who disrespect Mexican families. He had a knife. Tom's face went hard. That's assault. Threatening language with a weapon present. He stood, reaching for his gun belt. I'll ride out at dawn tomorrow. If Miguel so much as looks at Benjamin wrong, I'll arrest him. And Mrs. Hart? That family is trespassing on private property. You have every right to demand they leave. Will you back me up when I do? With pleasure. Elena Valdez needs to learn this is frontier, not Leadville high society. Mining money doesn't make you queen out here. Dawn came cold and clear. I rode up to Benjamin's ranch with Nashota on one side and Sheriff McKenna on the other. 3 riders, 3 different worlds, united by one purpose: justice. Through the kitchen window, I could see the Valdez family at breakfast. My son's food. My son's table. Benjamin moving between them like a servant, pouring coffee, clearing plates. I dismounted and walked straight to the door. Didn't knock. Didn't hesitate. The scene inside was exactly what I expected. Elena at the head of the table like a queen, Charlotte serving, Miguel with his boots on the furniture, the children making chaos. They all looked up when I entered, Nashota and the sheriff flanking me. Elena's face tightened with annoyance. Senora Hart, you should knock before entering someone's home. In my son's house? I kept my voice level, cold. I don't think so. I walked to the center of the room, and the weight of 3 weeks of rage settled into something sharp and precise. This house belongs to Benjamin Hart. You have 1 hour to pack your belongings and leave this property." For a moment there was stunned silence. Then Elena laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Your son is my daughter's husband. What belongs to him belongs to her. This is our home now." I pulled the deed from my pocket and held it up. "Wrong. This ranch is Benjamin's sole property, purchased before your daughter married him, purchased with my money, put in his name alone. Charlotte has no legal claim to this land. None of you do." Elena's face transformed. The mask of civilized superiority cracked, and beneath it was pure fury. She stood, her chair scraping back. "That land was ours. The Anglos stole our grazing rights in 1875. My father lost everything when your people took what belonged to Mexican families. We're only taking back what's owed. When someone justifies their cruelty by pointing to past injustice, how do you respond?" Elena's family had suffered real loss. Anglos did steal Mexican land in the 1870s, but this ranch was never theirs. They were using historical pain to justify present theft. How do you separate legitimate grievance from illegitimate revenge? Where's the line between justice and just another crime? I let Elena's fury hang in the air for 3 long seconds. Then I spoke, my voice calm and cold as January Creek water. "This land was never yours, Doña Elena. I bought it legally from the Johnson family in 1885. They homesteaded it under the Homestead Act in 1880. Your family lost grazing rights on land 50 miles south of here. Tragic, yes, and unjust. But that has nothing to do with this ranch. Your grievance is with history, not with my son." "History?" Elena's voice shook with rage. "Your people! My people didn't steal your grandfather's land. The government did. The banks did. Powerful men in distant cities who never set foot in Colorado. But my son? He's a cowboy who works from dawn to midnight, who's never harmed anyone, who opened his home to you because he loved your daughter." I pulled the letter from my pocket. Or so he thought. Elena's eyes widened. She recognized it. "Benjamin," I called toward the door. "Come in here, please." My son entered slowly, his face drawn but his shoulders straight. He'd heard everything through the open door. Now he walked to the center of the room and looked directly at Charlotte. "Did you ever love me?" His voice was quiet, but it carried. Charlotte stood by the stove, coffee pot in hand. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she set the pot down and turned to face him, and her expression was colder than any winter I'd ever known. "Love?" She said the word like it was something distasteful. "Benjamin, you were a means to an end, a lonely cowboy with land, an easy target. My mother needed this ranch to restore our family's position. I did my duty, nothing more." I watched my son's face, watched something die in his eyes, then watched something else, something harder, stronger, take its place. "Get out!" His voice shook, but it was firm. "Take your family, pack your things. I want a divorce." Charlotte shrugged, actually shrugged, as if his pain meant nothing. "Fine. You'll die alone, gringo. No decent woman will want a divorced failure. You'll rot on this cursed land with nothing but your mother's pity." Miguel exploded from his chair. "You dare speak to my sister that way?" He had his knife out, the blade flashing as he lunged toward Benjamin. But Nashota was faster. The old Ute moved like water, stepping between Miguel and Benjamin without seeming to hurry. His hand rested on his own knife, his dark eyes steady and utterly calm. He didn't say a word. Didn't need to. "Drop the knife, Valdez." Sheriff McKenna's voice was flat, his revolver aimed at Miguel's chest. "Drop it now, or I'll arrest you for assault with a deadly weapon. Your choice." Miguel froze, his face twisted with rage and something else. Fear. He looked at the gun, at Nashota's unwavering gaze, at the sheriff's cold certainty. Slowly, cursing in Spanish, he lowered the knife. "Smart choice," Tom said. "Now sit down and shut up while these people pack." Elena stood, drawing herself up with whatever dignity she had left. "You'll regret this, Benjamin Hart. That ranch is cursed. You'll never know peace there. You'll die alone and bitter, wondering what you could have done differently." Benjamin looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but steady, the voice of a man who'd found something he'd lost. "Better to die alone with dignity than live in paradise with liars. Better cursed land that's mine than stolen comfort that never was. I'll take my chances, Doña Elena." It took them 2 hours to pack. 2 hours of bitter silence broken only by the sound of trunks being dragged, children crying because they didn't understand why they had to leave, and Elena's cold commands in Spanish. I stood on the porch with Sheriff McKenna, watching every item loaded, making sure they took nothing that wasn't theirs. Miguel threw his belongings into the wagon with violent force, shooting murderous looks at Benjamin, at me, at Nashota, but he didn't say a word. The sheriff's hand rested on his gun belt, a quiet reminder. Charlotte moved through the house like a ghost, packing her things with mechanical efficiency. She never looked at Benjamin, not once. When she walked past him on her way to the wagon, carrying the last of her dresses, she might as well have been passing a stranger on the street. Elena was the last to emerge. She stood in the doorway of Benjamin's house, my son's house, and turned to face us with her black silk dress catching the morning light. "This isn't over, Senora Hart." Sheriff McKenna stepped forward. "Yes, it is. This is private property and you've been asked to leave. If you return, it's trespassing and I'll arrest every one of you. That's not a threat. That's Colorado law." Elena's mouth tightened into a thin line. She climbed into the wagon without another word. The wagons rolled out slowly, raising dust that hung in the air like the ghost of their presence. Charlotte sat beside her mother, her back straight, never looking back. Miguel drove the second wagon, cursing under his breath. The children's faces appeared in the canvas opening, confused and tear-streaked. We watched until they disappeared down the road, watched until even the dust settled. Then there was only silence. The good kind of silence. The kind that comes after a storm passes. "Come on," I said to Benjamin, touching his arm gently. "Let's clean this house." We worked together for hours, scrubbed the floors where their boots had tracked mud, washed every sheet, every pillowcase, every towel they'd touched, opened every window to let the autumn air sweep through and carry out the smell of them. Elena's perfume, Miguel's tobacco, the children's sticky fingerprints on everything. "We're washing them out of here," I told Benjamin as we worked. "Every trace, every memory. This house is yours again." He nodded, scrubbing the dining table where Miguel had put his filthy boots. His hands were still raw, but he worked with something like determination now, like he was reclaiming territory one clean surface at a time. By afternoon, we'd gathered everything they'd left behind, a broken comb, a child's torn shirt, Elena's handkerchief. We carried it all outside and built a bonfire. Benjamin struck the match and we watched it burn. Nashota appeared as the smoke rose. He'd been waiting at the edge of the property, giving us time for our work. Now he approached the fire, and in the Ute way, he spoke words over the flames. His language was old and rhythmic, and though I didn't understand every word, I understood the meaning. When he finished, he translated for us. "May this land heal the one who tends it. May the water run clear, the grass grow strong, and the man who works this soil find peace. The bad spirits have gone. Let only good ones remain." Benjamin's eyes were wet, but he smiled. "Thank you, Nashota." The old Ute nodded and placed a hand on Benjamin's shoulder. Then he was gone, disappearing into the cottonwoods like smoke. That night, Benjamin slept in his own bed for the first time in 3 weeks. I heard him through the wall, heard him cry, but it was different now. Not the broken sobs of shame, but the release of someone who'd been holding everything in for too long. I lay in the guest room and smiled sadly into the darkness. My son was going to be all right. It would take time, but he'd survive this. He'd be stronger for it. When morning came, I woke to the smell of coffee. Benjamin was already up, standing at the kitchen window in clean clothes, watching the sunrise paint his land gold. "Mom," he said when I joined him. "Thank you, for everything." I put my arm around him. "That's what mothers do, son. We fight dragons when our children can't." He leaned his head against mine. "I can fight my own dragons now." "I know, but it's nice to know you don't have to fight them alone. After betrayal, how do you reclaim your space? Sometimes it's not just emotional, it's physical. Washing away every trace, burning what they left behind, making it yours again." Benjamin scrubbed floors and burned belongings because he needed to feel like his home was his again. Have you ever had to physically reclaim a space after someone hurt you? What did that process look like? How did you make it feel like yours again? 3 days later, I sat with Benjamin on his porch in the early morning light, both of us holding tin cups of coffee and watching his cattle graze in the distance. The autumn air was crisp and clean, smelling of sage and coming winter. I cried again last night, Mom. His voice was quiet but steady, but it felt different. Not shame, just letting go, like something heavy finally breaking loose. I reached over and squeezed his hand. That's healing, son. Tears aren't weakness. They're proof you're still human after everything they tried to take from you. He nodded, staring out at his land, truly his land now, reclaimed and clean. I thought asking for help made me weak, made me less of a man, that I should have been able to handle it myself, to protect what was mine without running to my mother like a child. And now? Now I know it makes me human, strong enough to admit when I'm drowning, strong enough to let someone throw me a rope. He looked at me, his eyes clear for the first time in weeks. I don't know how to thank you for what you did. You don't have to thank me. That's what mothers do. We fight dragons when our children can't, and when they're ready, we teach them how to fight their own. I think I'm ready now. I know you are. The sound of hoofbeats made us look up. Nashota rode into the yard, a bundle wrapped in cloth tied to his saddle. He dismounted with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life on horseback and joined us on the porch. Brought you venison, he said to Benjamin, handing over the bundle. You need to eat. Build your strength back. Thank you, old friend. Nashota settled onto the porch rail, his dark eyes surveying the ranch with approval. The land feels better now. The bad spirits have left. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the morning light spread across the grassland. Then Nashota spoke again, his tone casual. My niece, Ayana, she's widowed, lives near the southern reservation, lost her husband 2 winters ago to fever. She's strong, quiet, good with horses, knows how to work hard. Benjamin's cup paused halfway to his mouth. Nashota. I'm not ready, Benjamin said firmly. I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone like that again. I know, Nashota's face was understanding. But when you are ready, and someday you will be, remember there are good people in this world. Don't let the bad ones make you forget that. Ayana is good people, so are many others. The world is bigger than your pain. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll remember. That evening, as the sun began to set, I saddled my horse for the ride back to Denver. Benjamin walked me to where she waited, his hands in his pockets, his face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. Will you visit soon? He asked. Every month. But Benjamin, this is your home now, your sanctuary. No one can take it from you again, because now you know your worth. Now you know you're strong enough to defend it and wise enough to ask for help when you need it. We embraced, and I felt him hold on just a moment longer than necessary. When we pulled apart, his eyes were wet, but he was smiling. I love you, Mom. I love you too, son. Always. I mounted my horse and turned her toward the road. Before I rode out of sight, I looked back. Benjamin stood on his porch, one hand raised in farewell, the sunset painting the sky orange and gold behind him. His ranch spread out around him, his cattle, his land, his life, his dignity restored. He was going to be all right. They say the frontier makes you hard, that survival out here means learning to fight alone. But I learned something different on my son's ranch that autumn. I learned that real strength isn't isolation, it's knowing when to call for help. It's standing between someone you love and the people trying to destroy them, even when those people hide behind smiles and family ties. The West taught us to be tough, yes, but it also taught us that some battles require allies, witnesses, and the courage to say enough. If you take nothing else from Benjamin's story, remember this. Property in your name alone is power. Know your legal rights, document everything, and understand that family, whether by blood or marriage, doesn't give anyone the right to exploit you. Charlotte's family used culture, guilt, and intimidation as weapons. But the law was clear, and the law protected my son. Knowledge is armor on the frontier and everywhere else. To every parent watching, your children are never too old to need you. Benjamin was 34, a grown man, but he still needed his mother to remind him of his worth. Don't wait for them to ask. Sometimes love means showing up unannounced and fighting dragons they're too tired to face alone. This story happened in 1887, but exploitation happens every day. If it resonated with you, share it. Someone in your life might need to hear that asking for help isn't weakness, it's survival. Leave a comment. Tell me, who would you fight for?